but I'm really happy for all of you to be joining me today. My name is Natalia Rashkowska. I did this research last summer with my mentor, Dr. Nadia Dasha and Dr. Robin Stevens, and with the support of alumni funding. The presentation is entitled From Bots to Joke, Is There a Place for HIV Prevention on Twitter? And this is the larger question we'll be focusing on today. So just to give you some background information, this is a breakdown of how many HIV cases we saw in 2018, new cases in particular. We have an age group breakdown. As you can see, the blue and the yellow indicate the younger individuals under 34. They make up more than half of the new HIV cases. In fact, 21% of all new cases were young adults, which is classified as 13 to 24-year-olds. On the other hand, we also have a breakdown of the total diagnosis, and you can see here a breakdown by female and male. 81% of all new HIV cases were male. This kind of creates a backdrop of the population we were hoping to reach in this study. We were particularly focused on targeting young males aged 13 to 24. Here's an even larger incidence graph of over the last few years. The orange line, as you can see here, shows 25 to 34-year-olds. There is a drastic increase of about 30% within this age group. On the other hand, we are happily seeing a decrease in the age group of 13 to 24. This is a significant difference. Both groups are increasing and decreasing roughly around 30%. We were hoping to kind of figure out what is driving these trends in particular. We figured social media might be playing some type of role here. As many of you know, social media is a dominant force in the lives of young men. I mean, it's a driving force in a lot of people's lives, not just young men. If we look at this graph, we see data collected in 2017 about the average time spent on social media per age group. It's about 3.5 hours for 16 to 24-year-olds, which is that young adult age group. Similarly, it's almost 3 hours for 25 to 34-year-olds. That's not much better. But when we look at 55 to 64-year-olds, we see that they spend less than half of that time on social media. Given this, we are able to argue that social media is playing some type of role or represents an important source of information and potential driver and place for discussion within this age group. In fact, 40% of people, according to one study, use social media to stay up to date with current information and news. That means that all those 16 and 24-year-olds, when they're spending, 3.5 hours on social media, are a lot of times getting their news from there, their information from there, whether that's political or health information. They're getting bombarded with information for 3.5 hours. So why Twitter? Well, even though you could say that people are spending more time or more people are engaging with Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or YouTube even, Twitter is a large database of information, of people's thoughts, of words that are much easier to access using research tools. You can still see that Twitter does play a really large role within the US and within adults. In particular, we have an average about 44% of people within that age group that we were looking at engaging with Twitter. That's almost 50% of the population we're looking at. In particular, it's also interesting enough that men do slightly, and this isn't necessarily significant, but slightly more engage with Twitter. So that's why we decided to do Twitter, other than the fact that something like Snapchat is private and not something that researchers will have access to, while Twitter is much easier. Additionally, there was an ability to filter the keywords based on what people were saying with words. However, Twitter creates an interesting idea of a digital neighborhood, especially given the fact that in a lot of areas, in a lot of cities, we do not have traditional hangout spots anymore. I mean, I can't really speak of it given how young I am, but I'm told that back in the day, individuals, would be engaging in parks and in malls and a variety of other activities. But these days, the picture on the left kind of demonstrates a typical interaction within young adults. They're spending time together, but while simultaneously being completely and utterly plugged into the outside world. They could be spending time with 5 people, but they're truly engaging with 25. This creates this idea of a digital neighborhood, that we are now no longer limited to a small, local, our own little neighborhood, but that our neighborhood extends much farther past that to include so many other people, to include an entire network that's interconnected and put together. So this creates this idea of a digital neighborhood. But this digital neighborhood does more than just allow people to talk to each other and connect with more people. It also propagates this culture of likes, loves, thumbs up, retweets, shares, and all the other ideas behind that drives that. When you share something, individuals can support you, they can disagree with you, they can amplify it, they can spread it. So this digital neighborhood is much bigger and has much greater reaches than you simply telling a friend something. Now you're no longer just telling one friend something, you're telling hundreds and thousands of friends something, and hundreds of thousands of people are looking at, millions of people are looking at it, and you're going viral. So it's this idea of really, really amplifying these voices that we are then sharing. Now, one simple comment can reach so many more people, one simple post. And these images are meant to illustrate just how strong this pull of information and likes and retweets can be, and how many people it truly can reach. So given this digital neighborhood, it also, other than just amplifying the messages, it has many other factors that it plays a role in. One of these factors would be social learning. This idea that because individuals are spending time together and they're sharing their information together, it could be a place where people learn things. In particular, it could be a source of health information, we theorize. It could also be a place where norms are being set. The fact that you are reaching so many people will create a culture of what's accepted and what's unaccepted, and it will lead to behavior modeling, which will be this pressure to fit in. So individuals will learn something, will observe something that will become the norm, and then they will try to copy that in order to fit in. They'll copy some of the messages that are being shared. If they see that something's being liked by so many people, they may fear more pressure in order to like that. And that's just pure peer pressure. But in this case, it's much more amplified when you increase the amount of voices that you're reaching and seeing. And another aspect of this that really strongly pressures all of this and drives this is the anonymity that you're able to reach while on social media. So in summary, although little is known about conversation about HIV among young adolescent men, we are curious about what exactly is being said, what type of topics are being covered, and what exactly is being spread. Given the fact that you are able to amplify this voice, we feel that it's really important to know exactly what is being said, rather than just knowing that it's being said. It's great to know that, these messages are being amplified, but what are these messages and what are they amplifying? Is it positive or negative? That's something that we're about to explore. I just wanted to share an example of this message that's being amplified, toxic masculinity. Given the anonymity of the platform, given the fact that society places a lot of pressure in order to act a certain way, this toxic masculinity is something that can really be hidden within the platform. And it's something that's very relevant, especially to these young men aged 13 to 24 who are growing up within this culture. I wanted to share in this moment one particular tweet that's going to frame this conversation moving forward. This tweet, I will be saying a lot of explicit language within this presentation, and I do apologize for that in advance, but it is just something that comes with the nature of the work. There was quite a bit of this particular language. I'll also define the slang terms when necessary. So in this particular case, the text says, if I texted bitches back, I would have hoes, but all the bitches, sorry, mine is in the way, I want to do is smoke and suck dick, don't want to know how to make $20, that ain't cute. This particular text really amplifies and shows the messages that we're going to be exploring of not only gender roles and stereotypes, but additional male toxicity in terms of feeling the fact that they are some type of control over situations, and the stereotype of a lot of men having a lot of women, and in engaging in a lot of intercourse in particular. So this kind of frames the conversation and presents you an example of the type of messages that are being spread and are being amplified on there. Additionally, our study investigates popular tweets. This is kind of the scope of it and what we were hoping to limit it by in order to see what is being amplified. So I keep saying that word, but it is quite relevant as it's what is being shared and what's being supported. And I will later explain how that's being defined. And we were particularly interested in this topic, given the fact that our study hopes to fill and address online discourse about HIV in order to then be later applied for programming. We were hoping that if we can expose what's being shared and what's being amplified, future studies and future programs can really focus on addressing it through different methodology in order to curb some of these negative messages that we're seeing and replace them with the positive ones. So with that being said, how did we exactly get our information? So we started out by looking at tweets in 2016, and there was almost 150 billion of them. That's much too large to address. So we took a garden hose of that, which is taking 1% of all the tweets found within that. That was our sample size. But then we county mapped it in order to know where we are focusing on, and we limited it by males aged 13 to 24. Now, how was the age reach in particular? We often looked for accounts which had, well, the computer program looked for accounts that had shared their birthday in order to then be able to limit it to that, whether that's happy birthday, happy 21st birthday, things like that, that allowed the computer to figure out the age of the user. We then had specific words within our research that we were able to focus on, these words that the computer scanned for within the tweets and then would take. So the computer would look for words like HIV or intercourse or sex or some of the more explicit words, and it would then include the tweets with those words. We removed any links to porn, which was about 7,000. And then finally, we got our final sample of 1810. We did not look at all of those tweets. We did then take a look at the most popular tweets, which I'll define later. And that's how we broke it down. It's quite a lot of effort, but it's mostly done by the computer, luckily. So we then had to look over what exactly was the content within these tweets. So we used engaged tweets from male Twitter users aged 13 to 25. We excluded tweets from institutions and agencies. Like I said, we really were wanting to focus on people and human voices and what these male were saying. We had 2 trained coders, I was one of them, who was identifying the emergent themes we reached 90% agreement, which means that we would look at the tweets separately and we agreed on the ideas of each tweet that we saw 90% of the time. And then the final themes, which I'll be presenting, were decided on by a team of us. We came together and sat down and discussed some of the example tweets we pulled in order to figure out the larger theme of what we're looking at within this data. So popular tweets, finally, what are they? What do these popular tweets mean? And for us, they were retweeted one or more times, so not including one time, so 2 or more times. And what is a retweet? I feel like I should explain this to some people. I'm not sure what my audience is, but retweet is basically where you post something on Twitter, say a message, and then you go ahead and share it. So say I didn't necessarily post this message, but it could be on my profile too if I retweet it. And retweet is known to either be agreeing with something or mocking it, depending on the message that's associated with it. Later on, I'll also be talking about the sex tweets. So these are a lot of the words we use to filter through our data. And they basically mention sex-related topics like intercourse, sexual orientation, and different words for sexual anatomy. So it's all those explicits that I talked about, and a code book. So we couldn't jump from just the tweets to the themes. We actually had a code book, which was kind of a middle step where we had the tweets. We then categorized them based on a code book we created, and then we came out with the themes. So the code book organized the tweets based on keywords, and some of these keywords included HIV positive, condom use, condomless sex, multiple partners, jokes, stigma, awareness, political, and several other categories, which created this code book. We had a definition for it that we then used when we were going through the tweets and categorizing them so that we would see where a tweet would fit in terms of the code book. So here's a much easier schematic to look at in terms of what exactly was going on. So we have 18,100 sex-related male tweets. So like I said, the sex-related, it talks about the intercourse, HIV, all those words that we had, those are all the tweets. We then looked at the 472 most popular tweets. And we took a look at them first with the code book. So we took, first we skimmed it. We saw what was going on within there. Then we created a code book. Then we went back and reviewed all of the tweets again, trying to figure out where do they fit in the code book. Finally, we sat down, we pulled the tweets, we looked at the code book, we looked at the keywords, we looked at our tweets and figured out what are the larger themes that we are actually seeing. It's great that we have all these political tweets, but do they fall into a larger category of what we see these keywords falling into together? And then with team consensus, we reached the final themes that I'll be talking about. So here's a word cloud of all the tweets and kind of the most prevalent of words. As you can see, HIV, STD, and AIDS are some of the most popular ones, as well as some other explicit ones, like dick. There was a lot of talk about women, given the fact that this was a lot of men posting these. But yeah. So in terms of the categorical breakdown of everything, so these are the keywords we used in our code book, a sample of them of the more popular ones. And as you can see, awareness and stigma were two of the most popular categories. So we applied the most codes to tweets that were awareness focused and stigma focused. Next, we had political and jokes, and anti-stigma came as fifth. I want to highlight that, and I want to specifically focus on the fact that how close stigma and awareness are. They both make up about 13% of the codes we were seeing. Interestingly, U equals U, which is a movement, it did not have as many tweets about it. Neither did medical adherence, and I want to just highlight that too. All right, so this is a breakdown of what exactly some of these examples within these tweets within this particular top 3 categories look like. So to start with, we have awareness. Awareness deals with tweets promoting equality and representation for HIV positive individuals. So these tweets were the positive tweets, the ones that were promoting the messages we want to promote. They were the ones that were sharing correct information, that were sharing information that, you know, was making some type of positive change. And an example of that would be, one thing I'll never forget is HIV thrives in silence. Talk about it. Hashtag HIV is not a crime. So that was a popular tweet that we saw that was retweeted and shared a positive message. On the other hand, like I said, it's about a 13, well, they're both 13 split between the pro stigma, which on the other hand discussed HIV negatively. This included jokes, this included stereotyping, this included spreading negative and incorrect information. This was all classified under this pro stigma code. So an example of that would be like, look, man, herpes sucks, but at least you don't have AIDS. Me giving a coworker a pep talk. This was a popular tweet. It's, you know, making a joke at the cost of somebody that may be experiencing HIV or AIDS. So these would be the type of tweets we saw quite often. And then for political, it said, tweets contain messages spreading activism and injustice. Often they call for governmental action. An example, decriminalization of HIV. Another very popular theme within the political category would be ending violence against people with HIV. So an example of this tweet would be, show commitment to ending hashtag violence against hashtag woman with hashtag HIV. Talk with us, not for us. So this was a tweet that somebody tweeted at the White House in particular, asking for them to engage with the conversation and do something about what was going on. These tweets were particularly popular given the time period, given what was going on with legislator about decriminalizing HIV. So this is just a table demonstrating the 3 definitions. And like I said, the 4th one was jokes, which do fall under pro stigma as well. So some tweets were double coded. They really often spread. HIV. I'm sorry, spreading negative sentiments about HIV. Themes. We had 4 main themes. We had othering, political and activism, risk behavior, and health behavior. So we broke down the behavior category in 2 as we felt that it was better suited to discuss the negative behaviors and the positive behaviors that were being promoted. To go over each one individually, othering, shared negative sentiments towards sexual orientation or gender identity and HIV status. So this theme focused on kind of what the image is demonstrating, on this idea of separating individuals with HIV from each other. They were be poking joke at HIV. They would be promoting stigma. They would be sharing stereotypes and just overall ostracizing the other individuals in a negative way. For example, a tweet that was very exemplary of the othering theme would be people with AIDS say anything because they trying to find a die anyway. And this tweet was quite popular. It was actually retweeted 45 times and favorited another 50 times. So that's quite a lot of engagement for it. And it really exemplifies this theme that we're trying to get at of misinformation, really unfair information towards individuals with HIV. Political and activism was another theme that we strongly saw within our data. And in particular, these tweets focused on promoting social acceptance and awareness of HIV-related issues. So this is what we want to see more of. This is what we hope that future programs will focus on. And for now, like I said, it became a split between those 2 categories, kind of battling it out within our data. But this theme included categories of LGBTQ and women's rights, anti-stigma, decriminalization of HIV, ending HIV violence, and focusing on spreading the positive messages and overloading the negative one. And this tweet was retweeted 11 times and favorited another 17 times. And it says, "One thing I'll never forget is HIV thrives in silence. Talk about it. Hashtag HIV is not a crime." Behavior, this time risk though. So risk tweets promoted unsafe sex practices. In particular, a lot of these sex practices we define unsafe were condomless sex, concurrent substance use, so engaging in sex while also engaging in using some type of substance, cheating, having multiple partners. And this was quite a popular category as a lot of people go online to share their conquests. In particular, this tweet below, I'm going to read it and then define the slang in it. It says, "On God, there's got to be a higher power because I'm a raw dog guru. Say a prayer for me." It's quite a silly tweet. And raw dog in common young person talk means not using a condom. So there was a lot of these slang terms and talking about not using condoms. There was the condomless brotherhood and the bareback brotherhood it's called, and where the individuals do not engage in the use of condom, and that was quite prevalent within our data. And this was retweeted and favored both 30 times. So there was favored 30 times and retweeted 30 times. So it's got quite a bit of engagement too. Health behavior. These, on the other hand, went against the bareback brotherhood and in this case focus on safe sex practices. So it included PrEP, condom use, U equals U, undetectable load status, adherence to taking medicines and PrEP, and testing. As I said, medical adherence and U equals U actually did not have as many tweets coded, which we believe has something to do with not many people sharing that, or it becoming an incoming movement. We're not sure what that was, but it's not as popular as promoting of sexual health testing or PrEP or condom use. And this tweet kind of goes directly in opposition of the one I just presented, and it says, "It's like sex, it's better raw, but more safe with the condom." And this one similarly was retweeted 25 times and favorited 26 times. So again, in direct opposition to it. And this is kind of a running theme. I don't know if many of you noticed that. It's that we have almost like a split. We have the good and the bad, and we just want to amplify the good because right now the bad is winning over number wise. So the othering tweets, when you look at the entire breakdown of how many tweets total were othering versus, activism, you get a 34.33 to 25.45% difference. This is a significant difference with othering being more prevalent than activism. Similarly, risk behavior and health behavior, again, you see more of the risk behavior being promoted. So almost a third of all the tweets we coded ended up being and promoting othering and negative sentiments, while only a quarter promoted activism. So we want to flip that and change that over. In particular, the top tweets, out of all the tweets, we looked at these ones, the top ones for retweets all were othering tweets. So the top one says, "My dick only small if she's seen a lot of other ones, and that makes her a hoe. That's her problem, not mine." We coded that as gender norms and pro stigma. We classified that as othering, and it had 267 to 190 retweets. So this was excluding some of the bot tweets that I'm about to get into. This was one of the more popular tweets. And as you can see, out of the top 3, all of them were othering. When we extend that to top 5, we still saw that same pattern of always being othering. So even though we are still coding a lot of the activism tweets, the negative ones are still more prevalent. They're the ones that are getting more favorites, more retweets. And yes, a lot of them are jokes, like you can see for the next 2, but it doesn't change the fact that we are amplifying negative voices. So it says, the last one says, "Would you all rather date someone who is HIV positive or date someone who capitalizes the first letter of every word when they type?" It's clearly a joke, but it's clearly filled with stigma and negative attitude towards people with HIV, and it really strongly reinforces this theme of othering. Thoughts? This is a really interesting finding and something that was really exciting when it was spotted. It has to do with the fact that some of the more popular tweets, in fact, the most retweeted tweet we saw within our entire data was a bot. How did we figure out that they were bots? Well, honestly, when you look at their account, it's pretty easy to see. So once we search back the tweets and access them, we were able to see them constantly tweeting, having a lot of polarizing messages, which means they were very clearly and smartly crafted, which I'll demonstrate in a second. But these accounts isn't just constantly tweeting. They're tweeting like 5 times a minute, nonstop messages of the same variety over and over again. And like I said, these messages are very, very smartly crafted based on what they're trying to achieve. So we've all seen bots that, promote some type of, or trying to steal your information or access your bank account. They're very clearly and smartly designed to get you to click on that link, to get you to input that information. And in our case, what we were looking at was public health and how these bots were spreading stigma about public health, and they had very smartly designed messages to engage with a certain side of the debate. And these tweets, interestingly enough, were traced back to the 2016 election time period. So because we looked at the time period around 2016, we were able to get all of these election tweets. And these, like I said, were some of the most retweeted tweets. So here's an example one, and the one that I said was the most popular. And the reason why it was the most popular is because it had so many retweets and favorites. It had 2,962 favorites and about 2,800 retweets. And the tweet says, "Weed is illegal, but knowingly giving people HIV isn't. White people make the dumbest decisions." This tweet is currently removed on Twitter, but it was something that was clearly smartly crafted by this user, which is actually not a real user. If you look at their account, that's just tweeting a lot of this information, a lot of this misinformation, or not necessarily misinformation, but polarizing attitude. And in this case, it's promoting, we don't know how individuals could be interpreting whether, it should be that weed should be legal or that that HIV should be illegal. But on a more clear note of what side the argument is at is the idea of a weaponization of HIV stigma. Like lot on election time period, which means that a lot of these tweets were addressing one or the other side. I'm going to just go through some of these examples because I feel that it's very important to understand what we were seeing by seeing these tweets yourself. For example, the first one says, well, then that's when the HIV kicks in. Women 50 plus are among the fastest growing contraction group. That's not true. We know that's not true. I showed you the data when we first started that women are not the fastest growing incident cases of HIV, just like 50 plus is also not the fastest growing age group. If anything, it's 25 to 34-year-olds. The next one has to do with politics, and like I said, polarizing, for in this case, the right side. It says, I want to see Hillary's fans' reaction when they see her naked statues. I bet she has HIV. Release Clinton's medical records. Very pointed tweet, very much targeted at making the right side against the left. And here it's in case you didn't know, Mike Pence wanted to divert all national HIV funding into conversion therapy for the LGBT. Or the next one says, teen girl infects 324 men with HIV on purpose. Not a real link, not a real study, but it's something that's being spread. And if people are just looking at it and not engaging with, they don't know that. And then the last one, exclusive Clinton Foundation AIDS program distributed watered down drugs to third world countries. Not true. Once again, just something to get people's attention and get this stigma spread. And I mean, it's just using it for political gains. And that's what it comes down to. Not all of these accounts were bots, but it's something that, you know, is often amplified by these bots. So it's kind of a two-sided coin of people sharing these sentiments, but then bots similarly sharing these sentiments. And when someone's bombarded with all this information, they're bound to become polarized. In terms of COVID, I wanted to quickly take a second to address this before I talk about the effects social media has on your behavior. So in particular, recently we are facing an unprecedented time where individuals are left without social interactions and spending most of their time on social media platforms. Since March, many of these young adults have not been in school, they've not been in college, they've not been working, they've not been, you know, engaging with their normalcy of their life, their normalcy a part of, but instead they were bombarded with information and potential mistrusts on social media. And given the fact that we believe this might be a large source of their information, we believe they might have been bombarded with a lot of misinformation. The study, we haven't quite ran on this yet, but I think it's a really interesting next step to see how exactly the messages of misinformation about COVID are being spread right now. There's an even greater pressure to fit in given the fact that we are not having these in-person interactions, but social media interactions. And whether it's, you know, sharing your engagement in sexual intercourse and unsafe sexual intercourse to give yourself some of that clout that teens are always searching for, it doesn't change the fact that COVID might be something that might be amplifying that on social media, given the fact that people are not having these in-person interactions and that the digital neighborhood is completely taking over. Jumping back to behavior, I just felt like I needed to address the COVID, as without it, it isn't giving the full picture of what's going on right now. So social media and behavior. There is still many ongoing studies on how exactly is social media leading to behavior. We know a lot of psychological theories of self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you're arguing something, it might happen, or you know, a lot of peer pressure that's existing, and several other theories of how, you know, being exposed to the same information could drive a certain behavior. And what past studies have demonstrated is that social media has large effects on mental health and large effects on behavior in terms of mental health and how individuals feel about expressing their mental health. It also strongly affects it in a negative way, leading to higher numbers of depression, anxiety, and all of that. And it does culminate, you know, from that peer pressure, from that desire to fit in, especially when you're bombarded of thousands of messages of celebrities and Photoshop. Social media is also prevalent for spreading false beliefs And if we believe that, constantly being exposed to a false belief will lead it to be behavior based on that belief, this is something that's a large concern. And then a study that I found that I think is actually a good one, something that we should look towards promoting, is the fact that improving one's behavior is often done by sharing positive sentiments about that behavior. So this particular study talked about how being an advocate for an idea and for a cause, and, for example, promoting sexual health testing, what that will do is potentially lead you to have more sexual health testing yourself, and then possibly your peers around you. So if you're posting about this and someone shares it, there was a study that demonstrated that sharing that means that you're more likely to engage in it. So, if you're constantly exposed to it and see that a lot of people are sharing it, you will share it yourself, which then could potentially mean that you will engage in it. It's kind of roundabout way of thinking about it, but it's something that is starting to prove to be true, which means that we could potentially harness this power of social media and this interaction and create good positive behavior by promoting individuals to be advocates. In that particular study, the individuals focused on spreading a positive video on a positive health video to Facebook, and it had a poster attached to it. And when this video was shared, it kept spreading and spreading, and it meant that the people that were spreading it were actually more likely to engage in the health behavior once they were asked later on about the type of behaviors they engage in. In conclusion, as we saw in our study, othering tweets are the most retweeted and favorited tweets. These tweets are the most prevalent in terms of the actual data itself. They're also the tweets that are the most retweeted and engaged with. They receive the most likes, the most interactions. Based on that, we think social media may be a driver of HIV-related stigma because people are surrounded by it. They're more likely to amplify that negative message. And then high-risk sex behavior are shared more than health risk behaviors. So we are seeing more promotion and more support for these more risky behaviors rather than the safe ones. With that being said, what are our next steps? How do we address this? How do we deal with what we know now? Well, I believe that interventions that utilize social media need to understand that stigma, endorsement of HIV risk behaviors is prevalent on Twitter. It's something that occurs a lot. And it is something that may be driving some of the behavior we see. Given the fact that these young adults are spending so much time on social media, we think that interventions need to kind of counterbalance that by promoting more positive messages, getting more people to share them, more people to believe them, but also more people to be informed and educated. As we saw, there was, the weaponization of HIV stigma, especially for political gains, is happening. It's polarizing voters. And what we need to do is do the opposite, polarize the right information, polarize true facts, true statements, such as U equals U, and that medical adherence can lead you to be undetectable. That's a message that we need to take over on Twitter. Similarly, future studies need to analyze the amount of misinformation on social media, which is something I just addressed. Together, interventions can work to counterbalance that. And other social media outlets need to be similarly explored. Like I said, Twitter is actually not the most engaged with platform, but it is a platform that's easily accessible for research purposes. I wish we had much easier access to Snapchat to see what people really are saying, but that's unfortunately an invasion of privacy. But it would let us into the world of these young adults to be able to know what their experiences are and what they're feeling, especially within this new digital neighborhood that exists all around them, and they can tap into any of it at any particular moment. So I think it's really important just to leave you with that message of spreading the positive information and using social media for the good, even though it has so much bad in it. So I want to take a moment and thank my mentors, Dr. Nadia Daushin and Dr. Robin Stevens, as well as my team who helped me code through all these tweets and figure them out, Tille, Stephen, Elizabeth, and Jacqueline, as well as the funding sources. So I'm happy to take any questions that may be here. That will be all.
Wonderful. Natalia, thank you for that excellent presentation. And I encourage everyone to ask any questions they may have. While folks type their questions in, I actually have a few questions of my own and just some thoughts. You mentioned that you wanted to engage and you wanted to do the research via Snapchat, and there was the issue of confidentiality. And you did explain why Twitter. Now, my question is, did you find any barriers with platforms like TikTok or Instagram?
So the study was done last summer, and TikTok was not a thing yet.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually could be a really interesting source, because unlike Snapchat, which, like I said, is private, TikTok, I don't think there is an ability to make it private as much as I know. And there is already, you can see that there's a lot of both misinformation as well as positive information. I mean, especially addressing what's going on in our country right now. I know TikTok is one of those platforms where a lot of the current protesters that are protesting what's going on in our country are going to the platform and filming live what's going on and then sharing that. And that's actually super duper important right now, to be engaging with that and seeing, especially for someone like me who lives in the suburbs and might not necessarily be seeing the mass protests, be able to engage with them on that outlet rather than just looking at the popular media. But yeah, I think TikTok would be a really cool platform to explore. Another barrier with Instagram, for example, was the fact that we often saw tweets would disappear, and it's also much harder to access individuals' accounts. One,
Mhm.
for some reason, well, not for some reason, but a lot of individuals are private accounts, but also individuals can quickly delete their stuff. And another thing is you have to be following people to see their information, other than looking at the hashtags. So, and picture images are also much harder to, explore, same with video images rather than just text.
Yeah, and with that kind of that modality of sharing information, I know a lot of health information. I call it the memification of news or health information, where false health information gets spread via a meme, and you can't really code an image, you can't really capture text that way. So I see how Twitter is easily studied because there's text that you can
Yeah.
work with. So so it looks like we have a few questions coming in. Vicky, do you want to take that over?
Sure, yeah, I would love to. So the few questions, the first one is kind of starting with some information that was at the beginning. Someone asked, are the new diagnosis statistics that were presented just for the country, or just for Pennsylvania?
They're for the country. So those are the recent CDC statistics from there.
Awesome. All right, thank you. And next question says, excellent presentation based on so much effort. Are data from Twitter available for more real-time study and monitoring? Thanks.
They are. They actually are. So you can pull a garden hose sample at any point from Twitter and explore that information. As far as I'm aware, we chose a particular time frame as this data is used for other studies as well. So that's kind of where that came from.
Awesome. Thank you. Another one, great presentation, thanks. Is there a follow-up study planned? And if so, what is the research question?
There actually is a follow-up study, or I guess a concurrent study that's being done about, it's looking at not only these tweets, because like I said, these tweets were county mapped. And the reason why I said that was because another study is focusing on how the HIV rates are increasing within those counties. And that's basically kind of concurrent with this. So we know what the messages are. We see that the negative ones are more popular, but are they really translating into more cases? Is that what that means? And that's another study that's being done on this.
Interesting. Cool. Thank you.
Wonderful. So that looks like it was all the questions. Folks, if you have any more, please ask. Oh, we got one. We got another one.
Yep. So this next question says, I don't think fake news alerts exist yet on Twitter, but do you think monitoring of this nature by the platform itself will help limit the spread of false information?
So you're right. Fake news alerts do not exist on Twitter yet. It is something I believe was tried out on Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. I read a study about it when I was looking over background for my project. And I remember seeing that in their study, and like I said, it was on Facebook, it stated that it actually did not limit the the spread of false information, but what it ended up doing was just informing individuals that it was false. So it was still being spread because some people wouldn't engage with the material as much. But others, oh no, I'm sorry, I take that back. What it said was, if I recall the study correctly, it actually said that it was being spread just as much, but what it was being spread, it was people would be saying like, oh, this is fake news, like watch out for that. So it was still being spread in terms of that, but it would have that little like closure of like, oh, this is fake, look at this, like don't follow this, if I believe correctly. It's a great study. You can definitely search for it and find it, but that's what that study demonstrated, of like adding the fake news alert on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's a real ethical question, like how do you delete these things? There's the mitigation of this fake news on Twitter. They say it's fake, but it's still there. And I know Twitter is currently grappling with what to do with false or dangerous or violent information, let's say. So I think it's a conundrum we're facing, and I mean, at the end of the day, I personally think we all have to be active consumers of sexual health and health news. And I think as service providers, it's about educating those we work with about how to spot what is real and what is fake and what is harmful. I'm really happy you brought up the example of bots. A lot of folks are susceptible to kind of reading a tweet from a bot and thinking it's real. Or even on Facebook, I've seen fake Facebook profiles spread misinformation. What kind of advice would you give to service providers or just general folk who want to know, like, what are some of the signs that you found that indicate someone's a bot?
Yeah, like I said, looking at their account usually kind of tips you off right away. I remember the first one I kind of stumbled upon. I was a little taken back. I didn't think much of it, but then when I approached my PI about it, I showed the profile to her and she was able to tell right away, because if you look at it, there is so many tweets that are being tweeted of the same idea nonstop. And if you think about it, a human wouldn't do that. Nobody spends every 2 minutes, I mean, maybe, but I highly doubt it, every 2 minutes tweeting something new. And this account this is very common for bots, would constantly be retweeting it. And if you then look at it follows and who it retweets, it's more bots. So you kind of discover this chain of connection of these bots. And like I said, it kind of comes down to reading the language and looking at the account, because it is hard to spot, but it's something that can be caught if it's looked at closely.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I know definitely one of my practices when it comes to social media is it feels a little intrusive, but I investigate a little further. I see if there's any other pictures, or they have friends even who's following them, who are they following? Just kind of parsing out, does this seem like a fully fleshed out account?
Person. Yep.
So it looks like, thank you again, everyone, for sticking with us and asking more questions. So Vicky, I'm going to hand it over to you to go through these questions.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So next question is, was influencers, so for example, celebrities, YouTubers, factored into the study of these tweets? What's your opinion on influencers and their power to influence positive behavior?
We did not particularly look at who tweeted the tweets. We wanted it to remain largely anonymous, so I don't actually know fully whether some of these tweets were shared by celebrities and YouTubers. I have an idea based on the language they were used that some of these tweets were shared, but for example, activists and politicians and other people like that, although we excluded any agencies and institutions we knew of. In terms of what's my personal opinion on influencers, I think they have a really large power. As someone that is really close to the age group that we studied, I think a lot of people, especially with YouTube being how popular it is right now, and Instagram, a lot of people are closely following what these individuals are doing. This is particularly tied to, what's going on with COVID or with the riots right now and protests. Individuals are really engaging and seeing what's being tweeted, shared, and liked, who's supporting what, who's donating where. That's a big one. Individuals always want to see these celebrities engage with the direct cause, as they are some of the individuals they consider to have the most leeway with that. And they want to then follow that and support the same way. And I think they have a lot of power. I believe when the COVID pandemic still first started, Kylie Jenner was asked to tweet and to share with her followers that she is, you know, social distancing. And I think that's great. That follows her and truly like believes in the things she does and supports. I think it's really important for them to be setting this good example and leading the way, you know, whether it's somebody speaking out about the importance of sexual health testing and engaging in condom use. I think celebrities need to be more open about that and more vocal about that, because I think they can have a really positive message that they can share.
Great, thank you. So next question, are there similar studies from other nations that parallel your study? And if so, how did their findings compare to your study?
There are, I'm not sure if there are other nations. I know there are other studies for different time periods for the United States. And this one that I'm thinking of in particular show an even more drastic negative difference between, like more volume of negative tweets. So in my mind, because this was done a couple years ago, things are improving. Whether that's, you know, a naive thought, it could be, but I'd like to stay hopeful.
Thank you. And do you have any information about where bots originate?
I actually do not. This is definitely something I should look into. I think it's really important. But that would be a really good fact to know where they come from, especially because a lot of the ones we were seeing were very much active during the election time period. So it'd be really interesting to know who creates them.
Thank you. So that's all the questions I have up right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vicky, for facilitating those questions, and thank you, Natalia, for bringing this presentation to us. I think this information is important, more so now than ever, because it could set the stage for future studies, and I'm happy there'll be a follow-up. You know, so I think it's great to think about, how do we consume information online? How does information spread online, and what is spreading? I was particularly taken aback by how infrequent U equals U was shared, for instance. You know, in the work that we do, that's something that's really positive and affirming and really good scientifically backed information that we want to get out there, you know. And as folks who want to spread that message, we have to think about, what are the channels, what are the ways, and how do we get good, solid information to the world? So, and if there
I definitely agree.
And if there are no more questions, I just want to thank you once again. And if you have any closing statements for our audience, the floor is yours.
Definitely. Like I said, I want to once again encourage everybody to consider what's being shared online. And, you know, if your practice or if some of your patients are online, to kind of educate them about that and remind them to filter through what they're reading, to look things up, not just follow the crowd and see, you know, a video is being shared, let me believe everything it's saying, but watch the video, take it with a grain of salt, fact check everything. You know, we have so much access right now, so it's much easier than it's ever been before to get as much information as you can. Use that and encourage your patients to do so too. If, like I said, if you have a practice or some type of organization, make sure you're out there on social media sharing the right messages to the audience that really needs to hear it.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just a note to our audience, as we close this webinar out, a survey will pop up. Please take that and let us know how we are doing. And don't forget to join us this afternoon for the very appropriate Patient Empowerment as Consumers of Sexual Health Care, learning how to talk to your doctor in terms you know. So thank you so much and have a good day, everyone.